Okay, I think I'll go ahead and get started at this point. There may be a few people who join us later, but since a few people are here. To introduce myself, my name is Elizabeth Heppenheimer. I am the Journal Development Specialist at JoVE. So I work within the editorial department to help authors publish their methods. I'm here with my colleague, Ron Myers, who is the director of JoVE Editorial.
Hello, everyone.
So how this is going to work is I'm going to give a relatively short presentation about JoVE, and then at the end, Ron and I will both be available to take your questions. We ask, since there are a few of us here, that everyone please mute their microphone during the talk and hold your questions until the end. And we will go ahead and get started, jumping right into it. So in this talk, I'm going to be covering the reproducibility crisis that we have in science and how JoVE is a solution to that problem. And then I'm going to walk through the details of actually publishing your methods with JoVE, including the scope of the articles published. And I'm going to walk through the whole publication process for a JoVE-produced video. And then, as I just mentioned, at the end, we will have plenty of time for discussion and question and answer. So as most scientists are probably painfully aware to some extent, we have a reproducibility crisis on our hands. What this means is much of what is published in the scientific literature cannot be replicated, either by new researchers who are coming in and trying to replicate a study, and sometimes even by the original researchers. They're unable to replicate it. There are a number of factors that contribute to this reproducibility crisis, but one of the major factors, and the factor that I'm going to be focusing on today, is poor methodology reporting. So what we have on the screen here is a press article from about a year and a half ago that covered a study that specifically looked at the radiation oncology literature. And the authors of this study, they reviewed the literature in this field and found that the majority of papers that they looked at in the methods section, there simply were not enough details for someone to replicate the study. Critical pieces of information like dosage, concentration, and instrument settings were typically left out. So someone who is coming in trying to replicate this study and is going off of just the methods section in the published paper is unable to replicate the study with the level of detail that it was common. And I think most researchers are familiar with this lack of methodology reporting in one way or another. I have on the screen now a methods section from a typical scientific paper. And I'd come across this situation quite a lot when I was a researcher, where I would be interested in a new method. I wanted to do something in the lab. I'd go to the literature. I'd find the papers that use the method. I'd finally get to the methods section and what I'm interested in, and it sends me to another paper. And this is a little bit problematic. I may not have access to that paper. I've already spent several hours tracking down the original paper. And if I do manage to access that new paper, it may send me to yet another paper or may not have enough details to help me do what I need to do in the lab. So I tend to think of this situation as like a downward spiral. When you're reading the scientific literature, you're trying to get the details you need to actually do something in the lab, and you're just on this wild goose chase trying to find enough details to get your work done. And this is where JoVE comes in. JoVE is a scientific journal, more specifically a methods journal, and we have a unique twist that is a solution to this problem of poor methodology reporting. So all JoVE articles do contain a text component that is fairly similar to what you see in the standard scientific literature, but as I'll talk about in more detail in a few slides, really the crux of a JoVE paper is a very detailed step-by-step protocol. And then, because sometimes it's simply not enough to read words and then replicate a very complicated protocol in the lab, all JoVE articles also have a video. So the JoVE article consists of both a text and a video component. And the video component is this detailed demonstration of the protocol that's described in the text manuscript. So from a video, you can pick up on subtler details, like what it means to shake a reaction tube lightly. You read that in a scientific manuscript, shake the tube lightly, and you don't necessarily know what that means. But if you have this visual resource where you can actually see the amount of energy that goes into shaking the tube, you are much better positioned to replicate the protocol. And there is a community benefit for the scientific community for publishing in JoVE. It helps increase the transparency of research methods. It helps solve this reproducibility crisis that's caused by poor methodology reporting. But what I want to emphasize early is there's also a big personal benefit to you and your research group for publishing in JoVE. So these JoVE videos are often used to train new lab members. So you have a new student or postdoc or technician who comes into the lab and you want to train them on the protocol. You can set them up with the JoVE article, and it reduces the amount of time that you need to spend face-to-face training someone new. And it also softens the learning curve a little bit. New students have a resource that can watch the video over and over, and they're less likely to make a mistake that is common when you're first learning a certain protocol. With a JoVE article, you're also able to retain knowledge in your lab when lab members leave. I think we all know that postdocs are very critical to lab functioning, but a postdoc is a short-term position. So you may have a postdoc who's in your lab for 2 or 3 years, who works to optimize a particular method, and then as soon as that method is optimized, they leave for a new position, and you're left trying to decipher their pile of notes in their lab notebook, and you're relying on just that one person for this knowledge. But if you publish your research in JoVE, you have this very clear record, and you're not reliant on that one person who no longer works in your lab. And then this last bullet point here it has always been important, but I think it is a little bit more important in this pandemic era that we're all living through. So you can share your JoVE article with collaborators who are not necessarily based at your institution, and it limits the need to travel between labs to transfer knowledge. This was always a little bit complicated. When I was a researcher, it happened 2 separate times that someone traveled to our lab to learn a protocol, sometimes at great international distance. And the person who was supposed to train them for those few days had accidentally double booked and was away at a conference, or had a personal emergency come up and they were not able to help train this person who had traveled. And so it's always a little bit of a logistical problem to arrange travel between labs. But now that air travel and traveling between states or countries is not as easy as it used to be, it can be very important to have a JoVE article to share with collaborators and to keep projects on track. So now that it's hopefully clear what the benefits both to the scientific community and to your lab specifically are for publishing in JoVE, I'm going to switch gears to talk some more logistics about the journals, starting with the scope. So JoVE is a broad scope journal, specifically a methods journal, and we publish methodologies across the life and physical sciences. Although JoVE is one single journal, we do have 13 different sections, which are listed on the screen now. And as I just mentioned, it's life and physical sciences, biomedical sciences, and so on. And we publish novel methods. So this would be a method that has never before been published in the scientific literature, either as a methods paper or as a results-based publication. But we also publish innovative applications of existing techniques. So this is a method that has been previously published and previously applied, but you've modified it in some way, maybe adapted it for a new experimental system, for example. And then very importantly, I want to emphasize that novelty is not a requirement for publication in JoVE. We do publish gold standard protocols that are well known in a particular field. Because of this poor methodology reporting crisis that I was talking about earlier, we see incredible value in publishing established protocols in video format. So one of the most common questions I get early on when I'm talking to prospective authors is something along the lines of, my methods don't look very interesting. Can I still publish it in a video? And a very common example that I'm given is, it's just pipetting clear liquid back and forth. And the answer to this question, if you don't think your methods look interesting, can you still publish, is an overwhelming yes. I like to remind authors that you've been working with this protocol for months or years, and it may not seem interesting to you in the conventional sense of the word, but to a student or younger early career researcher who is desperately trying to learn a new protocol and is coming up short in the written scientific literature, this protocol is very interesting to them. So I wouldn't want authors to get hung up on thinking that their methods aren't visually interesting, quote unquote, in the conventional sense. And this does also apply to computational methods. Computational methods, in a way, are some of the hardest to reproduce based on written method sections. There's tons of nuances and parameters and lines of code details that you really can't capture in a traditional manuscript. So we do publish computational methods. This is a real example from earlier this year that's running through some R code. The only rule of thumb is that if it can be written as a step-by-step protocol, we are able to convert it into a video. And then the last thing I want to say about JoVE's scope is about methods collections. So these are analogous to a special issue, where it's a collection of articles that highlight different techniques that are unified under some kind of common scope or topic. So the example on the screen is small molecule screening strategies. And these are led in collaboration with an active researcher in the field who works with a JoVE editor to define the scope of the collection and to curate it with the most important methodologies in that field. And I'm mentioning this now because in case anyone who is here today is interested in submitting to JoVE anytime soon, I highly recommend that you browse our open methods collections, so the ones that are currently accepting submissions, on our website to see if your manuscript could potentially be a good fit. It is not a requirement. We do publish articles that are not a part of the methods collection, but if your manuscript would be a good fit, we highly recommend that you submit and flag this collection as upon submission. So now I will be walking through the 6 major steps of actually publishing in JoVE. I just want to mention that this is specifically for a JoVE produced video, which is the most common type of JoVE publication, where JoVE handles all the aspects of video production. We do have an option, if you're outside our videographer network, for example, to produce your own video, but that is less common overall and a little beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about today. So this is for JoVE produced videos. The first step is manuscript preparation. This is the written component of your JoVE article. And we have a template available on our website, and it should look fairly familiar. Most parts are standard to the scientific literature. There's an abstract, an introduction, a discussion component. There are really just 2 parts of the manuscript that look a little bit different from most other publications out there. The first here is where you would normally find the methods section. We have a protocol section. And that is because we want you to write your methods as a protocol. We are not looking for the standard past tense explanation of what was done. We want you to write out exactly how to do the protocol as if you were explaining it to someone in person. So we're looking for words like select, choose, use, as if you were literally explaining it to someone. And most of the writing of the manuscript really comes in the protocol. That's where you'll probably spend the most time and we'll be looking to include the most detail. And then the second part of the written manuscript that's a little bit different is where you'd normally find the results section. We have a representative results section. As I mentioned earlier, novelty is not a requirement for publication in JoVE. So we do allow you to reuse data in the form of figures and tables from a previous publication. So what this looks like in practice, this is a real JoVE article that has a figure, and then in the caption you can see it's highlighted that it's been modified from a previous publication. This is common because we're interested in the reproducibility of the method, and we're not necessarily looking for novel data. This does only apply to data, though. The text of the manuscript must be entirely original. That cannot have been previously published. And if you do choose to reuse a figure or a table, we ask that you obtain copyright permission from the original journal, which is not a complicated process. It's the same thing that you would do if you were publishing a book chapter or a review article and you wanted to reuse a figure. It's typically a form on the publisher's website, and then it's all done digitally and is a relatively painless process. And then we also, of course, ask that the work is fully cited as it is here. And then moving on from manuscript preparation, after the manuscript is written and submitted, it will undergo a basic editorial check on our end for scope and formatting, and then it will be sent out for peer review. The peer review process is pretty similar to most journals. Those of you who have published before, this will sound familiar. It's typically 3 or more reviewers who evaluate your manuscript. They're specifically looking for scientific rigor, reproducibility, and the level of detail given in that protocol section in particular. As novelty, once again, is not a requirement for publication in JoVE, reviewers are not asked to evaluate novelty. We're not looking for the reviewers to comment on how novel the method is. We're looking for them to comment on how scientifically rigorous it is and how easy it will be to reproduce the method. Authors can suggest and oppose reviewers at the time of submission, and the JoVE editors do take these recommendations into consideration, but they ultimately make the final decision on who is invited to review the manuscript. So assuming peer review goes positively and any major concerns can be addressed through revision, then the manuscript will be accepted. At this point, the manuscript will be published on the JoVE website and indexed in all major indexing sites. So it will be on PubMed at this point, shortly after it's accepted, and Web of Science and any other major indexing site. The video at this point is still in production though. So you have a little placeholder on the JoVE website that says the video is coming soon, but the text portion of the manuscript is fully published. And then this is also when the video production begins, around the same time that the manuscript is accepted. And the first step is the script writing process. So the script for the video is written by JoVE scriptwriters. Authors are not responsible for writing the video script. And the scriptwriters will also put together a storyboard, which is a draft of the different shots that will be in the video. So it's kind of like a paper version of the video. And authors get a chance to review the script prior to filming, but as I said, they're not responsible for writing it. And authors at this point will also have a chance to get in touch with our production coordinator about any special equipment that will be needed for filming. The most common is usually like a microscope camera attachment. Our videographers are well-trained to work in scientific labs, so we usually have access to all this equipment. It's not a problem, we just address the logistics early. And any other questions authors may have prior to filming are covered at this time. And then after the script writing is all set, we move on to filming. So how this works for a JoVE produced video is that we work with a global network of contract videographers. So even though JoVE is based in the Boston area in the US, our videographers are global. So we are able to film at your location, and the person coming to film is usually someone who's reasonably local to you. They're coming within a few hour drive in most cases. We're not flying out from Boston every time to film these videos. And so as I mentioned, filming is on site. It takes place at your convenience. You'll schedule it with the production coordinator, depending on your availability and the videographer's availability. And it takes place on a single day. It usually takes about 6 to 8 hours to film. So we do ask you to block off most, if not all of the day for filming. The videographer will come and do an over-the-shoulder view of the protocol. So you or someone from your lab will sit at the bench and do the protocol, and the videographer will be right behind filming. And then we also film short interview segments with the authors. These are scripted ahead of time. There is no reason to memorize anything if that's something you're not comfortable with. You can see in this image here, the videographer is holding up a cue card. We're not expecting you to be an actor or anything like that. We come prepared to help you with this interview step. And then after the single day of filming, the footage comes back to our JoVE video editors, who then do the post-production, which is a fancy way of saying they finalize the video. So the JoVE editors produce the final video. We have a voiceover that is done by professional voice actors. And then there is a proofing stage where authors will review the video, correct any errors, for example, a mispronunciation of a scientific term, and we'll fix that ahead of time. It'll be fully proofed. And then the final video will join your text publication on the JoVE website. And pictured here is just a title slide from a recent video publication. So that wraps up our overview of why and how to publish in JoVE. Before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to point out that my contact information is up on the slide. If you don't have a chance to ask a question and would like to get in touch, please email me at that address, and I'd be happy to get back to you. But at this point, I'm happy to open it up for questions. Please go ahead and unmute your microphones and ask away.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Samer Zayud with you. I'm talking from United Arab Emirates. So now it's night time. So good evening from my time. Good afternoon in your time. So
Thank you.
I have thanks for presentation and everything. It was clear, but I have one question. So if I publish in JoVE, so this will be under Scopus or with not included?
Yes, it would be in Scopus. Yes, it would be indexed in Scopus.
So which quarter, or depend on the journal?
So any JoVE publication, it would be indexed in PubMed, Web of Science, Scopus, and all other major indexing sites.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm.
Thanks, is it clear?
Yes.
From Javier, one question is, the things you have to use, you have to put as a cuisine or kitchen recipe?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear you.
You have to put all the tools you have to use, if you have to put at the beginning as a kitchen recipe.
Yeah, so if you have a protocol that takes place on like multiple days, for the filming, we ask that you set everything sort of up in advance, kind of like a cooking show, so you can cut to each scene and still get all the filming done in one day. And then for the text manuscript, there is a table of materials that is basically like a shopping list for everything that you would need for the protocol.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that does vary from protocol to protocol. You know, some methodologies don't have a lot of ingredients. You know, you're just kind of doing Western blots, things like that. You know, the tables tend to not be very long, so it does vary based on technique.
The film have to be in the AVI protocol or AVI film?
We do accept different different formats. So if you did
Yeah.
decide to produce the video yourself, we would send you our video criteria, you know, with all the aspect ratios and refresh rates and everything. But yeah, we do accept different different formats. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think AVI and MPEG are also is also accepted. But if you did decide to move forward, we would send you all the details about that.
Hi, I'm talking from Missouri, from a small college here in Missouri. And my question is that if you could show where we need to go in the website if we are interested to submit a manuscript. So if we could actually see that where we need to click to start the process.
Sure. So I'm going to see if I can find it on my screen here and then reshare it. I believe it's jove.com/publish. That's not right. Let's see. It's a great question. Okay. Let's see if I can reshare my screen here. Okay, so I'm here at jove.com/author/publication. And this is where we have an overview of the instructions for authors. This is where you can get the template. And then I think both here and here, we'll have a link to our editorial manager site, which is a submission software that's used by a number of journals. If you've submitted before, it may look familiar to you. And then here is where you can actually either contact us ahead of time, which we often recommend that you do just because there's a few nuances to submitting with the whole video that make it a little bit different. But this is where you can actually go and submit a manuscript.
And so after this webinar, we will send out a follow-up email. So if you were interested in publishing, you can just reply to that. And one of the JoVE editors will reach out to you and you know, walk you through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.